Hello everyone, welcome to another KTaNE module tutorial, this time matrix mapping. On this module you'll see 39 gems. Two of them are buttons, one of them is a status light, and the rest are shaped in a 6x6 grid. And the goal of this module is basically to make a fully traversable maze with some constraints. Let's just get right into it. So, first of all, you'll want to note down these two grids. I'm using a template to keep track of them easily, and yeah. Use whichever tool you find most comfortable. Notepad would even work to some extent. But yeah, it doesn't really matter. You can also orient the grids in any way you want. You can give them any color you want in this tool as well. The colors don't really matter. It only matters that every color gets a value, kind of. And even then, the order of those values doesn't matter, just the fact that these values are distinct. I'm quickly gonna color the first grid, and then you'll see why there's a second grid as well. Next color is a bit rose-ish, so I would use a color like this. This is one of the more tedious parts of this module. The fact that you have to write down every single color, kind of. We'll use this as our goals, I guess. Then we'll also pick either the rows or the columns to be assigned these colors. So I'm gonna go with the rows, but you can pick columns as well. Also, the order of these rows and columns these rows can be interchanged. So basically I could, for example, make this column this rows instead. It really doesn't matter in which order you do it, because this module has a lot of symmetry. Next, we're going to write down the other grids. So, pressing this gem will switch between the two grids. So now we see the other side of this module. It is important that we rotate this grid the same way as we rotate the previous grid to draw it. So, for example, because I rotated this grid 45 degrees counterclockwise, I cannot rotate this 45 degrees clockwise, I must rotate this 45 degrees counterclockwise in order to maintain the positions balanced. And this looks like green, so I'm gonna use this color. So this, that's. Then that looks pretty red to me, so I'm gonna use this color. Really, the actual colors don't really matter, but this is just for convenience, and so that you know which color is which. I could just well have made that red, for example, something like blue, as long as I stay consistent with it. Then we have gold, but we already had a color for gold, so I'm just gonna use that. Yeah, this takes a while. And then finally, I also have a color for cyan already here. So I'm gonna use that as well. Then again, this order doesn't matter, I just like to do it in reading order. So we have green, red, goldish, and cyan. And that's all the setup done for this module. Now we get to the actual solving phase of this module, which is also a relatively lengthy process. In order to solve this module, we need to make a maze, but there's no way to make walls, or at least it doesn't look like it. The way you determine if you can traverse from one cell to another is by looking at the color that the cell has that you're currently on in the first grid, and the cell that you're moving towards in the second grid. These cells must be orthogonally adjacent, so you can't go from one corner to another, for example. But let's just look at, for example, alpha 1. Alpha 1 is a jade-ish cell, and if we want to move right, we go to this cell, but we look at it in the other grids, so it's towards red. In order to go from jade to red, that must be true in this matrix we're going to make. And the goal is to figure out what this matrix is going to look like. The constraints are that you need to be able to visit every single cell from every single other cell in some way, navigating towards it. And then also that every row and column has at least one passage that is false in this matrix. And finally, if there are no more deductions to make, and you can make every single remaining connection false, you must do so. So let's just go through an example to see how this plays out. Let's just start with a simple example. In this bottom left corner, we need to be able to access the rest of the maze, so we need to be able to exit this bottom left corner. So that's rows to, if we go up, that's to green. If we go right, that's also to green. So rows to green must definitely be true in order to escape that bottom left corner. If it were false, we wouldn't be able to move in any way whatsoever from the bottom left corner. And I like to indicate true with a lighter color and false with a darker color. But again, that's totally up to preference. Although the module does want you to submit white for true and black for false. But we'll get to that later. So, rows to green must definitely be true. Now, this grid here actually has a 6x6 grid of lighter cells and passages of 2 pixels wide. The reason 2 pixels long. The reason I made those is because it will help us see specific things more quickly. For example, now that rows goes to green, we can draw all the connections that are from rows towards green to be true, but only the cell in the passage that is closer to the one we're moving from. The reason we're doing this is because we've proven that rows to green is true, but we haven't proven the opposite, that gold to cyan is true. And therefore we have potentially got one-directional walls. And that's something that should be accounted for. Anyway, we can connect every single rose to green right now. For example, there's one here. Let's see. There's one right here. There's one here. One here. Oh, wrong position. There. And one there. I believe that's all of them. So I was just mentioning how we hadn't proved that gold to cyan must be true. But we can easily prove that. In order to make this maze fully connected, we need to be able to move to every single cell. How are we going to move towards the bottom left corner? Well, we need to enter it from either of these golds, and then we end up at a cyan. So gold to cyan must also be true. And now that we know this, we can also fill in all those connections. So you see that these connect either way. These are bidirectional balls, or bidirectional gates, basically. Gold to cyan. Are there any golds to cyan? This is gold to cyan. I believe that's all of them. Let's see what other deductions we can find. For example, here, to enter Foxtrot 2, we need to go from azure, because it's totally surrounded by azure, to gold. So azure to gold needs to be true. We can then fill in all of these. And you would kind of keep up this process for a while. You can also hold off of drawing all of the light paths at this moment and do them later, but I'm just doing this right now so that you can get an idea of how this maze works. This is blue to gold. This is... oh, misclick. This is azure to gold. This is azure to gold. These three are azure to gold. This is azure to gold. This is... okay, that's all we can find for now. Now, there's one more rule that I haven't mentioned yet, and we might get to it soon, so I'll just mention it right now. If the connection from one color in one grid to another color in another grid does not appear a single time, we will mark the tile or the connection as absent. And I'm saying this because I see that there are only 3 jade tiles, which means that they might not be connected to every single color. And if we look, jade is only connected to red and green there, red and green here, and red and green here. So jade to gold and jade to cyan never appear. And we're gonna mark those with a color to show that they are neither true nor false, but absent. And absence basically does not count for a false. So there still needs to be a 0 in that row and column, apart from the absence. Let's see if there's any other deductions we can make. Azure to red to enter the bottom right corner needs to be true. And we can draw all of these out, but we can also do that later. Then next deduction. Can be tricky to find these deductions sometimes. But I see Azure to Cyan on Foxtrot 4. To enter Foxtrot 4 you need to go from Azure and enter Cyan. So we're gonna mark that true. And finally we get our first false, because every row and column needs to have one false in it. And this row only has one available spot for one. And now we can, and this is why we have the maze. Now that we have a false, we can draw out some walls. And let's mark all the Azure tiles and see where walls appear. So Azure can't go to green, but any other direction is valid. This Azure isn't surrounded by greens at all. This Azure has a green at the bottom. This Azure has a green on the top and bottom. This Azure has a green on the bottom. This goes like that. Okay, this Azure is practically surrounded by, surrounded by green. This one only has one on the left. This one has one on the left and the bottom. This one has one to the top. This one doesn't have any. And this one doesn't have any. Okay, so now we've got some walls drawn in. And the reason I'm doing this will now be more clarified. Because we can now see multiple things going on. First of all, how are we going to enter this top left corner? We can't enter from the left anymore, so we need to be able to go from the bottom. This means that rows to green must be true. And it is, apparently I forgot to mark it. This is also how you can spot tiny things that you might have missed. But there's other deductions we can make. For example, here we need to be able to enter this cell from the bottom because from the top and from the left are not allowed anymore. So we are forced to go from green to jade. Or, no, my bad. Gold to green. I misread. So gold to green is forced. And gold to green gives us some things. This is connected now. This is connected. Yeah, you don't really have to draw all of that out yet. Oh, and this is also why these absences are important. This column has only one place for 0 remaining, or false. So it needs to go there. So now we have rose to cyan being false. Which means that these two are false. Which means that to escape this cell, you need to be able to go left. Which forces rose to red to be true. And yeah, you repeat these deductions until the module is, until the maze is discovered. Let's see if there's any more interesting deductions to make. Can I do anything with this cell? No. Hmm. Hmm. Okay, as you can see, it can sometimes be tricky to solve this module. Let's just draw in all the things we already know. Maybe it will help us find something that might help us. So, rose to cyan is false. Rose to cyan, this is rose to cyan. This is rose to cyan. There's not much rose to cyan. This is rose to cyan. Rose to red is true. We know this. The challenge in this module is basically just finding what is the next deduction. Alright, I think I found something. Here at Charlie 4, we can't enter it from the left, we can't enter it from the top, we can't enter it from the right, so we need to be able to enter it from the bottom. Entering Charlie 4 from the bottom means that we need to be able to go from gold to green. Why is it already marked, and why did I forget to draw that out? Well, because I didn't want to bother. Oh, misclick. It's really easy to forget that sometimes it's useful to mark things so that you don't have to think about them again. This gold. Okay, where's the next deduction? Mm. Okay. It should also be important to note this. Mm. This is fully connected. Hmm. What makes sense like that? Yeah, no. Hmm. Yeah, this is probably going to be a tricky deduction. Judging from how long it's gonna take me to figure it out. Is this it? Yeah, that's it. Okay, so this is actually a really tricky deduction to make. But this is about a pretty big region that's currently almost locked off. We have 2 rose tiles here, we have 2 yellow tiles here. So to go from either this to this, or this to this, we need to have rose to yellow be true. If it's false, we get this entire region here that's just straight up locked off. And that's a deduction we can make. These needs to be true, this needs to be true, this needs to be false. And that's not an easy deduction, but this module doesn't discriminate against any deductions. It just thinks if you can determine it through making one thing false and suddenly you're locked out, then it will just use it as a possible deduction. Here we have another yellow to yellow, which is false. Let's actually finish all of the rose tiles because we know the full rows, so we can just fill in all of it. I think most of it is just going to be all true. Yeah. Rose there. Oh. And you're seeing that the maze is getting more and more determined as we progress through this module. Let's draw all we know of the yellow tiles, which is that yellow is false, red is unknown. That's unknown, that's unknown. It's known this is false. False, false, and unknown. Both of these directions move you from yellow to red, so that must be true. And finally, we can draw out all of the yellows. We can also say that this is false, and because Jade needs to go to something to escape it, this needs to be true. And now, just for fun, we can finish this maze. I like finishing the maze because it's fun. So let's do our Jades first. Jade to green is true. That's true. Oh, this is true. Now we just go off all the remaining tiles. Yellow to red is true. Oh. True. True, true. Yellow to yellow is false. Yellow to red is true. Yellow to red is true. Finally, yellow to yellow is false. And this is our maze. Remember how there's one directional walls, so this may actually be a fully connected maze. How we determine if the maze is fully connected? Well, in Paint there's this very nice trick. You can do this with 2 steps. Basically, if you can start from the from the top left corner and reach every single tile, and then you're able to go from every single tile back to the top left corner, that means your maze is fully connected. So, I am able to go through these 2 directional paths anyway, so I can just fill this. Then this is blocked off on the way out, so we can't go through here. But here we can exit here, And from here we can exit to here. So we can reach every single tile. Finally, we will want to check if we can also enter from every single tile, so anything connected with two-directional walls works. This can exit into this. This can also exit into this, through here for example. And this can exit into this section, so that also works. To conclude, this entire maze is fully traversable, even though it may not look like it. Now onto the submission parts. So you may have noticed that while toggling, this gem had two different colors. It has one color from the first grid and one color from the second grid. And what we're going to do is, for every single color pair, we're going to look it up in this table, in this matrix, using the first color from the first grid, the second color from the second grid. And we're just going to submit white if it's true, and black if it was false. So we have a jade to green connection, which we concluded was true. Now this is still green, but the other side is azure. So green azure, or azure green rather, is false. Now we have gold connected to red. Gold to red was true. We have something to cyan, and it's rose to cyan, which is false. Now we have rose again to, in this case, red, which is true. We get green to rose, which is true. We have gold. Rose to gold is true. We have something to cyan. It's azure to cyan, so it's true. We have gold to gold, which is false. We have gold again, but this time to green. Gold to green is true. Something to red. And in this case it's azure, so that's true. Something to cyan. And that's gold to cyan. Gold to cyan is true. Something to gold. Azure to gold is true. Then we have jade to red, which we concluded was false. And that's a solved module. And as you may have noticed, it will never ask about these connections that were absent. And the reason for that being is, well, those connections weren't there. So why bother asking about them? And that's how you solve matrix mapping. I hope this tutorial has helped. And I apologize for any moments where thinking took quite a while.